Hello, everyone. Welcome back to episode 93 of VR Roundtable. We're back. We're here. We're in the flesh. We're live. We're doing all the fun stuff. As always, I have a full panel. Well, not as always, but I have a full panel today. We have Chris coming out of God knows where. He's always at a different place every week. We have Anthony in his same location there in sunny California. And we have Gary over there in gray and cloudy England. How's it going, fellas? Gary's going to be our host this week, so I got us going live. I'm going to turn it over to him.
Yep, so here we are back again. So this is our second live stream. Glad to see a few people in the chat. We're looking forward to getting your impressions as we talk about various topics tonight. But let's go over. So Chris, what have you been up to this past week?
Yeah, I've been in Florida this week near Orlando, so I've been going to Disney World a few times and hanging out, and also I went to the Void, so we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But just been having a great time. Not really too much VR, but kind of things that are related to VR, so it's been fun.
Yep, good stuff. Anthony, how about you?
Things have been going very well. You know, you guys can check me out live every day, so nothing really new going on. Somebody said, oh, Steve was saying sunny California, more like smoky California. It's smoke is everywhere. But other than that, everything's good.
Yeah. Okay. For anybody that's in the chat, it looks like we might be on a slightly different feed, but I think Steve's sorting that out. And so we'll get an update on that at some point anyway. But yeah, so anyway, while he's sorting that out, let's just start talking about, so we've got a few news topics that we want to go through, nothing too much, but we've got some games as well that we didn't quite get to last week, and we, you know, there's some pretty big releases that have happened not just over the past week, but also during the time that we've been off that we want to sort of get to as well. So let's talk about StarVR. So this is a HMD, which, you know, Star are by Starbreeze Interactive, and they had this headset that's been knocking around for God knows how long. I remember seeing pictures of this for years and years, and they had their big selling point on this headset was the ultra wide field of view. It was 210 degrees field of view. It looked fantastic. It used a novel method of tracking from everything that I've seen from it. I remember seeing the tested people trying this out a long time ago, and it used various methods of tracking over the years, and they've sort of changed it up and down. But the reason we're bringing this up now is the fact that they've changed their website over and they're showing sort of a silhouette of a new headset, which they're going to sort of formally announce, it looks like, on the 14th of August, so just in a couple of days' time after this show goes out. It looks interesting because we want something. This has not really been a consumer device. This has been something that's been used in arcades over the years. So this is something that we as consumers should probably get a little bit excited about, because on the website it says we've made something for you, and you know, this, I guess you could sort of interpret that as being more towards consumers than just arcades. That's my hope, but not necessarily true, so we'll see what happens with that. But yes, StarVR, I am excited about this this announcement, because it's good to have all these different players releasing various things. We've got Pimax, which are doing the very, very wide field of view as well, which is great, a great thing. But the fact is, they're sort of the only ones. They're the only ones doing this really, really wide field of view, as far as we know, because sort of Vive and Oculus, they're not really doing anything beyond the field of view that they've got. I'm sure they are behind the scenes, but they've not announced anything. So this is all good stuff. Anthony, I'll go over to you first on this. What do you think this headset could be, and are you excited about this wider field of view?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about a new entry into the headset arena, but I kind of always thought it was going to be just for arcades and like they do IMAX in chat. I think Chris Cox is saying I think that IMAX use them as well, and so I've kind of always thought this was more of a entertainment location kind of deal where they're going to be supplying headsets to those kind of people. But Acer, of course, you know, they came in, and when you think about Pimax, one of the things that we talked about a number of months back is that there's an opening here. There's an opening for another headset. There really is. And Pimax is kind of, you know, I don't know if it's the best run company. I don't know if they have everything figured out. And so a well-organized company can come in and make a splash, because we really don't have another headset. There's no LG headset, and so there's an opening, I believe. And so if Acer is looking at this as a possibility to get into the consumer arena with another VR headset, of course they do have the Windows mixed reality, so conflict of interest much is a question there. But it's going to be super curious. I mean, this is August 14th, so in a couple of days we will find this out. I know also at SIGGRAPH 2018 we might find out other stuff as well. There could be other technologies there. I think, was Google going to show up there as well, or there could be some other interesting stuff there as well. But I'm excited to see what happens. I still kind of think it's going to be an arcade thing, but who knows?
Yeah, I hope not. It definitely could be. There is no way to sort of presume this should be like a consumer product, but I think for VR enthusiasts, it's really sort of owning these headsets and taking them home, and like the Pimax, for example, because I'm still relatively excited by the Pimax, and we'll see some more impressions of that. So if there was another one, something that could maybe make things a little bit cheaper, or maybe take the specs even higher. One thing I wanted to ask you guys is the tracking method on this, because it seems to use its own tracking method. They're not using Steam VR or anything like that. Chris, what do you think? Do you think that's a good idea, first of all? And what are your overall impressions of the StarVR?
Yeah, it's definitely a bad idea. They really should be using Steam VR tracking at this point, since it's basically free to use, and then that really gives you access to Steam. I feel like if this headset came out and you couldn't really use it on Steam too well, or you needed some whole other integration, that would probably limit its sales dramatically. But I'm really excited because hopefully this is something that can kind of be released to the general public even before something like the Pimax, and just the wider field of use stuff is really cool. But they've always been doing this arcade stuff, but we've made something for you. It's calling my name, and I really want another headset like this, because Gen 2's got to come at some point. I feel like every headset right now is still kind of in that Gen 1 territory, and man, I just wish this was out in more arcades, first of all, like the current Gen 1 that they have, because like I did the Void and it was still using Oculus Rifts, and I'm just like, yeah, I've seen an Oculus Rift before. It wasn't, that much more immersive just because of the HMD. So I think like they got to push harder on this stuff, but hopefully it'll come out. What do you guys think this would cost if it came to consumers? Let us know in the chat, but it's probably, if I had to guess, probably like 800 or 900, but hey, better deal than a Vive Pro, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, we've got no idea, have we? Because they've not really released a consumer product. So it could be anything, really, depending on how far they've got with production and manufacturing, that kind of stuff. Steve, what do you think of this?
Well, I was focusing on everything, so I'm probably going to repeat some of the stuff you guys said. But I think this is either the biggest story of the week or one of the smallest stories of the week. And it depends on how the announcement goes, right? Like, I think on one hand, this really leads with Acer getting involved last October and becoming a majority owner of the company. It really suggests itself that they could be making a consumer product, which is the burying the lead in this case, because that's what we're interested in. The business to business stuff, the enterprise, that's all great, and it reminds me of the arcades of the early 1980s. Like arcades were popular not because arcade was the best business model, but really because there was no affordable way to get consoles into the home. The consoles weren't made yet, but as soon as consoles became readily available, it sort of killed off the arcade. And I think something similar may happen with VR here. So I personally think the long-term future is with consumerism in terms of VR and VR hardware. I think consumers is where the money's going to be. Arcades and the things that we have going on now, the B2B model, is just a way to sort of get the ball churning. So I'm hopeful that this is a consumer product. And talking about Pimax, and they're talking about their controllers. They seem to really mimic the Vive Knuckles with a splash of Oculus Touch controllers in there. And everything Pimax does is mimicking. That's not to say that Pimax didn't just mimic the StarVR. And in some alternate universe here, we may have a Pimax competitor that comes to market and is readily available by consumers before the Pimax itself even is. And I would find that incredibly interesting. So again, we don't know. the specs on the one that they have out now is it's great. Like it's closer to a Gen 2 in my opinion. So let's hope it's consumer facing.
Hey, one quick question here. So we know that Pimax always had these problems with the refresh rate, and then with also like in your periphery, like the weirdness going on at the edges. Do we know if StarVR has like, does it have the exact same problems? Because I thought like Palmer Luckey, when talking about these wide, super wide field of views, it's like they inherently have these problems.
Yeah, I've heard that too, Anthony, and I think it's probably just something that will happen. The distortion on the periphery is just something that is probably going to happen by having two flat screens at that angle. Possibly, I mean, and I'm sure they can sort of compensate for that somewhat in the software, but not entirely. The other thing to mention, you say the refresh rates. I don't think that's necessarily like an inherent problem with the displays. It's the kinds of displays that they're using, maybe. And I think everybody's trying to make these things on a budget. And I just wanted to quickly go back to something that Steve was sort of alluding to earlier on, because during the early days where we had arcades and then you had home consoles coming in, it was sort of a situation where they were trialing all of that stuff. These things, arcade machines, were far too expensive for anybody to just purchase one. So what they did is they put them in arcades, and then they could attract people in that way. Then when the first consoles came out, they were very, very low powered. I mean, the Ataris, the early Ataris, and all of these Pong machines and things like that, they could only do so much. The thing is, of where we are in VR, and I've mentioned this before, I think we're at a point where VR has a baggage that's going with it, and I've said this numerous times, like with gaming in general. So we have a level of expectation where we think VR should be now and where it shouldn't be, and we want everything in the home. We want consoles. We want VR to be in the home. So I think honestly, it could be the sense that maybe we need to step back from that and have a little bit more of these higher end devices in arcades. That might be the way forward, and get more people interested at that level because I don't think we're going to get people purchasing Oculus Rifts or Vives, at least like in the next generation, when they're still sort of relatively high priced and people haven't had a chance to try them. I think it's probably a better way to go about it, where the public do try these things in situations where they are like arcades and far more higher end systems. I don't know if anyone's got any comments on that at all.
One thing I'll say real quick, because like Steve was saying that he thinks that this is going to be a consumer thing, and arcades are going to kind of die pretty soon. But like Chris is going to talk about the void. And I do believe like Disney, they're working on, I don't know if you guys saw this story, but Disney's working on like this special magnetic floor. You know, they have these patents on this new floor that they're doing. And I think what VR arcades are going to do is like, we all want the Ready Player One experience. We want our full bodies in VR. We want to be walking around. We want to grab things, pick things up, put them down, like real physical objects. We want rumble sensation. We want to feel heat, wind, whatever else you could possibly do. And to do all of that in your own home, that's like 20, 30 years away, I kind of think.
Well, I don't think VR arcades are going to die completely. I'm not saying that. Like, you know, traditional arcades aren't 100% dead. What I'm saying is that to get the technology out there, as Gary mentioned, the initial technology costs so much that people can't get it into their home. So arcades are a way to sell some units, sell some software, and get some exposure. But then there becomes a tipping point where it becomes more consumer affordable and people can recreate the experience. Just, you know, again, as Gary mentioned, I remember playing Street Fighter 2 in the arcade a lot, and then eventually it came out on Super Nintendo and or Genesis, can't remember, and that version was sort of low fidelity compared to, you know, the version you could play in the arcades. But eventually the market flipped and turned on itself, and the home entertainment sort of became the lead, and arcades sort of was relegated to bowling alleys and things, you know, that were there out of convenience. And I think the money for VR hardware and software is in consumerism. Not right now. Well, even now there's a big chunk of it, but I think you know, as the years go by, that the value of catering to the home consumer is going to far exceed the value of catering to businesses.
You know, well, what I will say, like in agreement with that, is you go to these VR arcades now, and it's just a bunch of booths. It's like booths with shower curtains, you know, people playing Vives and just a bunch of ordinary booths. That is going to die. Like that is straight up going to die. Like if you have long-term plans for a VR arcade, you better make some really interesting things that involve you physically moving around and doing things. Because just being in a booth playing a Vive, I mean, just what you're speaking to, Steve, it's just simply a cost issue. But once it's low enough, people could have a Vive experience at home. It's going to have to get better than that. Now, one thing Colin Webb is saying in chat, he's coming in kind of harsh here saying it's not going to be an arcade thing. It's made something for you, stupid. If it wasn't made something for you, it would just be marketed to businesses and you would never know about it. I don't know. We've seen some crazy marketing ideas. So just because they say it was made for you does not mean it's consumer facing. They could say it was made for you to come to these places and experience next level VR. Also, the tracking, like if this isn't Steam VR, and it's obviously not going to be connected to Oculus, and it's probably not connected to Windows mixed reality. So this is like another new platform. How do you then connect to Steam and Oculus and a new version of Revive? That's good. And you're going to have these red lights everywhere. I don't know. I kind of feel like unless this is secretly a Steam VR headset that we didn't know about, and then on August 14th, oh, holy shit, this is Steam VR. It's got Lighthouses 2.0. Then we find out about that. Then that is a big news story, but I'm leaning towards the arcade thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's got to be arcade or it's got to be Steam VR. I think it would be a massive mistake for them to try to go for their own tracking system on this as well. Like you say, Anthony, it doesn't make any sense.
You got to think the tracking system that they're using now, though, is because Steam VR wasn't capable. Right? Like Steam VR 1.0 couldn't do what they were trying to do with it. So if 2.0 can, then that leads its way more into this. If I had to bet money on this, I would say it's a consumer product because I agree with Chris in chat that it says we made something for you. I think that is saying a lot, but like I also mentioned in chat, things have seemed obvious in the past and we've been dead wrong about it before. So I wouldn't voluntarily bet any money on this, but if I had to choose one or the other, I'm leaning towards it being a consumer product.
Yeah, Vive Pro, what a letdown. But I was just going to say, there's like an arcade right down the road from where I'm staying, and it's a VR arcade, and it's just normal Vives and a Rift or something. And I'm like, who's going to pay for this even today? Like, I don't understand who would want to do that. It doesn't give you any benefit. There's just like Audio Shield and some stuff like that down there. I'm just like, come on, you could just ask your friend who has VR and then do it for free. So I agree, that's definitely going to die. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, Flute Roger did put in the chat as well. It wouldn't need to use Lighthouses to use Steam VR, though, just like Windows Mixed Reality. As long as they had drivers to integrate with Steam VR, then there's no problem. And yeah, I mean, that is true. But even so, I wonder, you know, their own tracking method still doesn't seem to make too much sense. If they can get a Steam VR tracking solution at a relatively low cost, then that might be better for them to do. I mean, Steve brought up the situation where maybe the original Steam VR tracking wasn't doing it for them, because with these things in arcades, they're using peripherals like guns and stuff like that, and they could have these with Steam VR. There's no reason why they couldn't, using Vive trackers and that kind of stuff. But they obviously, because they've been developing this for so long, they decided to go down their own path. At this point, I think it would be a mistake for them to continue doing that. But you know, I'm open to it. I'm open to see what they've got to offer. Okay, let's get on to the next news story. So we spoke about Magic Leap last week quite a bit, but we do want to just mention this because the launch has now happened and it's available for $2,295 for developers or anybody else that wants to jump in really and just sort of experiment with it. Okay, so the first thing, when this was sort of launched and we had these very initial impressions from things like The Verge and Engadget, it seemed like overall there was a lot of disappointment from this product. However, one thing I want to get to, and I don't want to sort of stick on the early impressions too much, but we can all discuss that, of course. But what I want to say is, as this week has passed, and the interesting thing for me is, as this week has passed, the impressions that are coming from actual developers that are using this product has got far more positivity around it. And people have been uploading videos of what they've been making in Magic Leap. But yeah, it still looks pretty interesting to me. I don't know. I need to try this. I really, really want to try this. Steve, what do you think of Magic Leap? I know Anthony and I are probably the Magic Leap enthusiasts on this show, but what do you think?
Well, I think the gap between you and Anthony is probably larger than the gap between the rest of us. He is the Magic Leap fanboy. I think, I think the product is what we expected it to be. Like I've listened to the reviews from CNET, and I'm actually showing the CNET video now because they got some good footage from The Verge and multiple other places. I'm not going to name drop them all because I don't remember, but it's what we expected it to be from looking at it. Like, this is a HoloLens Me Too. I think they're pulling it off better than the HoloLens in the way that they're doing it, and with the way the goggles are. I think that's a better method than the sort of the astronaut space shield looking thing that the HoloLens is. So it's just not a big deal right now. This is a product for developers. This is signifying the future of AR technology. This is really it's immature still. Like, I really feel like the company had to get something out there. Maybe the investors wanted it, or maybe they just kind of wanted to get developers started, because until you get something out there and you get developers making content, you're always going to be that far from a real consumer release. So content is king, and always will be king. So I understand why this thing exists, but it is exactly what we expected it to be. And I'm not interested in having one. I would play with it if it was in front of me, but other than that, like, it's what we thought it was going to be. Sort of underwhelming.
Anthony, defend Magic Leap.
Well, I mean, what I'll say is, like, yeah, the Addie Robertson of The Verge, she kind of came in with her analysis, and when you heard that, it was like, oh man, this does not sound good. She was pretty much Debbie Downer on the whole thing, and a lot of the reviews were kind of like, it's okay, but it's nothing groundbreaking. It's not the dream we thought it was. But like you're saying, lots of people have gotten their hands on this thing. There's been unboxing videos. In fact, there's a very recent video that is like on the top of the subreddits, on the Oculus subreddit and the Vive subreddit, where somebody is like a review of Magic Leap, and it's like a 15-minute video, and it's this one developer, and he's going around his room and he's like meshing the entire room and doing, and it takes a while. That is disappointing, because I thought you're going to be walking from room to room. Hopefully once it like really meshes your room, like it could save that into its memory, and then the second you walk into that room, it says, oh yeah, I've already meshed this room. Boom, instant mesh, everything is lined up. But he was showing some demos where there was like a little dinosaur, there was like a little Magic Leap dinosaur that like went behind a box, and it was completely hidden behind the box. Like, their technology does work to a certain degree. People that are wearing it are saying, honestly, you don't really notice the field of view very much, because a well-designed application on it hides it very well. And then the other thing is, like, the only AAA thing that we've kind of seen so far is the one where it's like some kind of underwater experience, right? Where it's like you see some fishes and like seaweed type stuff moving around. And that looks pretty damn good. And this is something where you've got to put the damn thing on your head, and you got to look through it and see it yourself. And then I think you understand Magic Leap. It's the thing that Roni was saying from the beginning. You cannot advertise television on the radio. And so we're seeing these videos of it, and we're like, oh man, that looks lame. Little soldiers running around. Like, they look so incredibly basic. The graphics look like PlayStation 2 graphics. This is not impressing me. We haven't seen the real version of Dr. Grorbortz yet. So let's see that, and then let's see how different it is compared to that original video. And then I'm just saying, what I'm saying is the hate has gone too far. Now the hate has gone too far. Like Phil Yarn says, Magic Leap is trash. Dr. Freeman, I agree. It's not trash. It's like 3 or 4 years behind VR, and that's where AR is. But AR is going to be a major part of our future, whether you like it or not. 10 years from now, this kind of topic that we're having right now is going to seem like an utter joke because everyone will be using AR.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the product is trash. I hate on it, and really, I'm only hating on it in the sense of consumerism, like, and which is silly in a way because this thing is not intended for consumers. Like, this is a developer unit, and it's less consumer friendly than even the DK1 was. You know, if we think of what the Oculus DK1 was, it is trash compared to the CV1 that we have now, and Magic Leap 1 Developer Edition is going to be trash compared to whatever consumer product they get out years from now. So I'm only for it's a fault of them. Like, they've created so much hype on their project. Simply, even, you know, a lot of people have talked about the name Magic Leap, and I think it was at the end of the Verge video, or maybe it was the CNET one that I watched. They said this is not really a magic leap; it's more of a step, and that's all completely fair because that's what this product is. It's meant for developers. It's not meant for us. It's not meant for us to consume content. But yet, people are wanting to talk about it a lot from a consumer perspective, and that's not fair. But at the same time, it is fair because they hyped this damn thing up so much. So it's sort of karmic in some ways.
Yeah, Chris, what do you think?
They hyped it up too much. I agree with you, Steve. It's so weird. Like, I was watching all these first impressions videos and like they weren't allowed to show what they were seeing, and I'm just like, come on, Magic Leap, you don't need to hide stuff like that still, you know. But I'm glad I was watching some of that developer video, and I'm glad like there's actually some hands-on of what it can do, because the official first impressions didn't have that. So that was really cool to see. But, you know, like you all said, it's definitely just like a dev kit one. You know, when I had the dev kit one, I still thought it was amazing. But the CV one, like, I wouldn't, if I look at the dev kit one right now, it'll look like just a smeared mess, and I won't even be able to see what's going on. I'll just see giant pixels. So it's definitely in that same place, which is actually like less, or I guess closer to the VR stuff than I thought it would be. Like, I thought it would, you know, be still really, really bad and really bulky, kind of like the Beast demo, but they've got it miniaturized pretty well. So I'm excited for like the next 2-3 years to see if, you know, the Gen 2 of that, like, hopefully that would be pretty good.
Yeah. Hey, can I ask Gary a quick question? Gary, would it be cool to you, like, if you had a Magic Leap 1, and let's say you didn't have all your responsibilities, your family, you know, all the stuff that you have to do in your real life. If you had a Magic Leap 1, wouldn't it be fun to like try to like learn Unity or something and try to put little things in your environment and screw around with that and start, like, that would be super fun. I mean, I don't have the time either to do that, and I don't have the $2,300 either, but it would be fun, I think, to screw around with that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I would love to try it, and that's the thing with all these videos that these developers are putting out there. I think it is pretty exciting because you can hear and see their enthusiasm for this product. It's, as you say, Anthony, I think it is very difficult to understand how impressive this thing probably is when you try it. And I don't, because there was Addie Robertson from The Verge. She was very enthusiastic about Magic Leap, and when she finally got to try it and she gave this review, it was sort of lukewarm. And as somebody that was also pretty impressed by the promise of Magic Leap, then that sort of means that maybe if I was to try it, it would be lukewarm. And yet, contrary to that, you've got all these developers that are getting it for the first time. They seem pretty enthusiastic by it. One thing I want to mention as well, just in the chat, Chris Cox said earlier, I thought the room mapping would be automatically done. It takes him 5 minutes to map a room in the video. And then against that, VR365 said the room mapping was impressive to me. And honestly, I can take both points of view of that and sort of agree with them, because when I was watching that video and they were going around and they were mapping that room, I thought, this is pretty incredible, but it's taken a long time. 10 years down the line, where you don't need to deal with that kind of stuff, you don't need that kind of setup. These are not devices that you can take out and about with you. These are devices that you need to sort of spend a little bit of time with and sort of set up in a dedicated play space and then utilize them in that area. And I honestly wasn't expecting that. I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't really expecting that. So I'm hoping like in sort of 3-4 generations down the line, we don't need to spend that amount of time. It's instantaneous. And that will be the promise of what we want, because these things are destined to replace mobile phones. This is not even close. I mean, this is not even an approximation of what it needs to be in the future.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, it's just like my self-driving stuff. Like, currently calibration probably takes like 50-ish miles or like 40-ish an hour maybe to calibrate that camera thing, and then next week they're gonna release an update and it's gonna take like 5 seconds. So like it's that same thing. Hopefully, with software and with future hardware, like this will become instant basically.
Yeah.
Phil Yarn in chat says the potential is strong with this technology. Yes, but I'm in this for gaming. Well, I'm in it for gaming as well too. And Phil, I think you're like there can be a lot of interesting little gaming things that can happen with this. Like one of the criticisms people have with Magic Leap is they're like, okay, well, you can use this in your living room, but after about a week, what are you going to do? It's the same old games running in your living room. Like, what can they do there? And I personally believe like a coffee table, there's literally unlimited things you can do on a coffee table. Like we've all been playing Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice, and we've played the tabletop mode of that, and it's like a freaking Pixar cartoon is running right in front of you. Well, imagine you're in your real living room, you got a coffee table right there, and you got a Pixar cartoon that is running on your coffee table, but you still see your dog, you see your wife over there making dinner, you see your kids running around, but you still have a Pixar cartoon right there. That's the promise of AR. And some people will talk about, well, yeah, but we have pass-through cameras. We're going to be able to do that in VR. But the reason AR is a big deal is because of human relationships. We want to see the other person's eyeballs, and we want to see their pupils. So if our wife is in the other room and she's like doing something and she walks into the room, she doesn't want to see you in a Darth Vader mask where she can't see your pupils. And that's where AR is always going to have some power over VR until they have like a glass, until they can project like your face and your eyeballs on a screen on your AR headset, so people outside of your VR headset can see your eyeballs.
AR to me is not even remotely anything to do with gaming for me. I think I've sort of resigned myself to the fact that I want this to be a replacement for so many other types of technology. I don't want a laptop in my living room anymore. I want to just put on a pair of AR glasses and have a laptop projected in front of me and use it for that kind of thing. I don't want to use it for gaming in a spatial way. That maybe a lot of people do. I sort of separate it. VR is great for gaming. I think it's ideal for gaming. It's not really. It's not really. AR is not suited for gaming in my mind, and I'm more than willing to be proven wrong on that point. But yeah, I guess so. So I wanted to move on to another story, but this is only a very small thing. So there's not really a lot to say on it, but this was to do with Nvidia. They have filed a few VR trademarks, and this was found by a Redditor called Elevate Ditty. Can anyone pronounce that better than me? Because I'm awful at it.
Elevatedy. I don't know. He's actually watched our shows and commented and stuff, and I think he's won some of our keys in the past.
Yeah. So he found this trademark that was filed by Nvidia for these terms within various products that they have forthcoming, presumably, which are VR, VR Plus, VR2, and VR2 Plus. So these have all been filed on the same day as Virtual Link, which was something we've not discussed. This was something that happened. This was something that happened while we were off. We didn't do a few shows, and then there was this Virtual Link trademark that was filed by Nvidia, and this was to do with a sort of a standardization of a cabling system for VR. So it uses a USB-C cable, and because we've got so many different kinds of cables and different kinds of connections with VR, it's good to have any kind of standardization. So this was something that Nvidia trademarked, but this was something these VR Plus and VR2 and VR2 Plus are also trademarks. We don't know what they mean or even what they could mean. Has anybody got any ideas? Let me go over to Well, let me go over to Chris and also chat. Has anybody got anything that they want to say on this?
Yeah, it's probably just like we got to trademark whatever we can just in case we do something in the future. VR2 Plus. It's so stupid. But I mean, yeah, it just sounds like they're, getting ready for the future, or at least they want to be prepared for the future so they can have these trademarks ready whenever they want to do something related to VR. So I think like no matter what way you spin that, that's a good thing. I think the names are pretty bad. So they gotta figure out something.
Could it be all related to this virtual link? Could it be sort of these iterations of virtual link? Virtual link VR, virtual link VR Plus, and they've just got sort of different bandwidths that they're sort of planning ahead for all these different cables. Maybe, Anthony, what do you think?
Well, going back to our StarVR discussion, one thing we didn't get into is what wire is going to be going to this thing, delivering the frame rates, delivering the resolution that we need for StarVR. Because I've seen this one StarVR video, like a YouTube video of StarVR, and the cable coming out of the thing was like a fire hose. It was absolutely huge. It reminded me of these old monster cable speaker wires that I have that were like as thick as a snake. And so that's one of the other shoes that has to drop, is like, how are you actually getting full resolution, full bandwidth? So this StarVR thing, maybe they're using virtual link, and maybe they'll have this brand new cable, and maybe the only way you can use it is you're going to need one of these brand new Nvidia cards, or there's also a new AMD card supposedly that is going to be 50% faster than a regular 1080 Ti. I don't know. Do you guys keep up on all these rumors of the Nvidia cards? Like, there's an 1180 that's going to come out on August 30th of this month. That's a rumor. But other people are saying, no, it's going to be a 2080. And then it's crazy. Gary, I think you follow this every once in a while, right? You take a look at these rumors.
Yeah. I mean, I just catch them every now and again when they pop up on websites. But yeah, nobody really knows, I suppose. But there are these rumors of the 1180, and then there was another website that was talking about the 2000 series of graphics cards that Nvidia are doing. So yeah, we just got to wait and see. And I assume it will incorporate this new virtual link connection. Hopefully, it will. Steve, what do you think?
Until we get details, we can't really dissect it. I think, when you talk about unifying it down a single cable to a virtual link, if at its core, all it's doing is the graphics card is via the PCIe lanes, is passing on the USB data so that it doesn't actually have to go through the USB controller to the motherboard. We may gain some efficiencies. Everyone with a Rift knows you get 3 sensors and or more going. You have to manage your USB controllers and make sure you're not overloading one controller. So that sort of thing, I think will just simplify the process. You're talking about single cable connection. I don't think at its core it's going to have like this major performance benefit, or that they're really stepping into brand new technology. As for these names, Virtual Link, VR Plus, VR2, VR2 Plus, I think they're trying to keep it relatively simple. Like when you think of things like FreeSync and G-Sync, like they're all short, like roll off the tongue sort of names. Like it's to me that sounds better than saying Steam VR 2.0 tracking. That's like a mouthful to read on the side of a box or something like that. So I think keeping it short and sweet is actually a good idea.
Yeah. Chris, anything else to add?
I mean, I don't know, not really. Nvidia's just terrible with names, so I mean, this is probably related to that. Like they filed a trademark for the 1180, and then also like the 2080, and then like something other than a GTX, and it was like RTX or I don't know, something weird like that. So they're all over the place. I don't know. Hopefully they can sort out their naming stuff before they release new products.
Yeah. I don't want to stay on this too long, but one final thing I just wanted to ask everybody is, because obviously GPU manufacturers, both AMD and Nvidia, are very, very bullish about VR because they know that this is going to sell their graphics cards in the future. So it's good. I mean, I suppose it's very good for VR enthusiasts because they're pushing all of these things out there. It's great when somebody, even a non-VR enthusiast, purchases a new Nvidia graphics card and it's got VR splattered all over the box. You know what I mean? It's got VR ready. This is a VR card, and it will even sort of make them think maybe I should get into VR. I've got this card. It's VR ready, and maybe that will push a few people on. But yeah, I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on that.
I hope AMD, like their next series of cards, I really hope they put some legit pressure on Nvidia a little bit, like at least on the value end of the proposition.
Yeah. Okay, just onto a little smaller news story that we've got this week as well. So there was a report from I've not got a lot of details on this, but I did see the pictures of this for a Nintendo Switch VR mode that was uncovered. We don't know how legitimate any of this stuff is, but there were pictures and I believe like a short video that was posted by somebody that had hacked a Nintendo Switch and found some kind of legacy VR mode that potentially Nintendo were working on at some point. I don't know too much about this. It's interesting. We did hear reports last year, I believe, about a potential VR sort of case that the Switch could sort of slot into and then be used. And we all were a little bit apprehensive about that because of the weight of what this device would need to be, and also the fact that the resolution of the screen is only 720p, and there's a lot of questions over the power of this device as well, whether it could even sort of do any sort of rendering in VR that would be worthwhile. So I don't know how far they got with it, but the fact is that they possibly were interested in VR at some point. Anthony, what do you think?
I imagine well, first of all, this hacker guy that did this, apparently, yeah, it could be faked, but he's never faked anything before. So, people are assuming it's probably legit. It's probably Nintendo. When they develop this thing, they want to keep their options open. This is a 720p screen, right? So you're dividing it in half, and then you got to figure out, well, how many frames per second can each eye do? One thing I thought about, though, is the Nintendo 3DS, right? So what if the Switch could, all those Nintendo 3DS games, if it could run an emulator for those Nintendo 3DS games and run them at 60 frames per second in each of your eyes, you disconnect your Nintendo Switch, you slide it into a headset thing, you put it on. It has those controllers on each that snap off that are kind of cool for VR. I mean, there's a possibility here. I don't think Nintendo's going down this road. I think this was purely experimental, but it's interesting. We'd all love to see Nintendo come to the fold. And I think all of us, like anybody that's had a Nintendo 3DS, and if you played like Super Mario World 3D, that's an awesome game. And I would love to play that with like perfect 3D with no ghosting. That would be super sweet.
I think the video is definitely legit. Like, and Epix has said it in the chat, and I was going to follow it up had he not said it. But the Switch runs some legacy Android code, and we know Google embedded a lot of VR stuff in there in support of the Gear VR and all that. So it's more than likely a just kind of leftover traces of code from that, and less about Nintendo seriously considering VR on the Switch. Now, it's possible Nintendo was seriously considering VR on the Switch, but I think given the specs, if we set the resolution of the screen aside and we think about how the games perform on the Switch itself, they can't get high frame rate. They're not hitting 60 frames on any game that's not running in a dual screen or a dual eye mode. So I don't think it's possible the Switch can do VR that it would perform worse than Gear VR even. Like I don't think it's viable with their hardware.
Just on that point, Steve, sorry to interrupt, but I do, whenever somebody brings up that argument, and I do agree with you on that, but I always think back to the Oculus Go. The Oculus Go it's so low powered really, and yet the things that have been achieved on that system blow me away every time I use it. What do you think of that? I know it's probably not possible necessarily in the same way because they've optimized the Oculus Go, but...
Well, I think if they were having separate sets of games, like if you had, if Nintendo had Ken and Blaze Rush, then and games like that, then possibly. But I don't think you're going to see, Zelda Breath of the Wild in VR because they can't run the dang thing natively at more than 30 frames anyway. So how are they going to dumb it down to two eyes and get it up in the neighborhood of 60 frames, which it's just not possible. I have to put my money on this being a deprecated Android code buried still in the OS somewhere.
Yeah, Chris, how about you? Any thoughts on this?
Oh yeah, I agree with what you guys all said. Like they definitely have been experimenting with it, but I think ever since the Virtual Boy, they've been a little weary on all that. So
Yeah.
maybe one day, but I feel like Nintendo would never really win this VR race. Like they don't seem that interested. So
That being said, though, how awesome! Like if Nintendo got some of their content to 3D, I completely agree with Anthony. Playing Mario, just like Lucky's Tale, right? It's Lucky's Tale, but Mario, because Mario's a lot better game. And that's just playing content that Nintendo has now. But we know Nintendo are geniuses. Miyamoto is a genius, and they find really inventive ways to play their games and their properties. That if they actually gave VR a strong effort and tried and focused on it, they could make something that I think is very incredible.
Yeah.
What I would love to do is I would love to kidnap Miyamoto, lock him in a cage, and force him to play Pixel Ripped 1989 like 5 times from beginning to end. Because he would be like, mind is blown. I am going to make the most incredible Mario game that leaks into the real world. And oh my God, I mean, when you play Pixel Rip 1989, all the cool things that they do in there, just imagine if Nintendo got a hold of that. The problem with Nintendo, though, and this is the real Debbie Downer here, folks, when you turn on PlayStation VR, it runs through a warning thing that says, children under 12 years old, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's Nintendo's bread and butter. Nintendo's bread and butter is children under 12 years old. VR, there's probably nothing really inherently dangerous about letting a 9-year-old or 8-year-old play VR, but the technicalities of it, the legalities of it, no company wants to touch that, especially Nintendo. They are, frightened of these kinds of, like, they already got scared of the whole 3D thing with 3DS, and they backed away from 3DS and made the 2DS and all of that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's a way to play like Mario Kart Wii on the Rift, and I haven't done it in a while, but I tried to get it working a long time ago, and just any Nintendo game in VR is so awesome. And I used to play Mario Kart Wii through an emulator on my 3D TV, and so good. So they gotta do this stuff.
Yeah, I did try that Mario Kart in the Rift as well. That was pretty good. One point I want to mention is Fleet Roger said something where Labo VR, because what they could do is, and he's pointed this out, is they could make something very similar to like Google Cardboard and just have this thing where it's not like a serious endeavor into VR, but they could potentially get something that would get working and just be like a cool novelty for Nintendo to have. It's not like a serious thing for them to pursue, but they could very easily do something like that. But yeah, he brought that up on yesterday. I was watching the F Reality podcast. Shout out to you guys, doing a good podcast too. And I thought that was a great point, because I think that makes perfect sense. Nintendo could do this thing and not just put that many resources into it. Okay. No thoughts. Okay.
We agree, Gary. We agree.
Yeah.
Right, let's get on to Chris's thoughts on The Void, because I don't know if you can stay for the entire show, Chris, can you, this week?
I gotta catch a flight.
Yeah, let's get on to that now before he has to shoot off. Chris, why don't you tell us about The Void?
Sure. So I went to The Void in Disney Springs, which is pretty close to where I'm staying, and it's just a really weird cobbled together place, but it's really cool. Like you walk in, there's all these employees, and like you have to buy tickets, and we waited like, my dad went with my dad, we waited like 15 minutes, and then we got into this like pre-show room where it's more like a projector, and there's the guy talking about your mission, which was to sneak into the Empire and gain intel on like what's in this container thing. And then we finally went into another room. We had wristbands that got scanned, so like our username or whatever was passed along, and you could kind of cosmetically change your stormtrooper a little bit, which was kind of neat. And then we suited up, and it uses an Oculus Rift, which was probably one of the most disappointing things for me, because I want to see something next gen, because everything else was so next gen feeling. Uses Elite Motion and then upgraded headphones, so that's really the only modifications to it. And then there's also this giant haptic suit where you have all these different areas where if enemies shoot you, it kind of like buzzes, which didn't happen too often because I'm so good. It's probably what happened. So yeah, I guess I could. I don't know. Should I talk about the experience, like the plot first, and then like how it was, or
however you want to slice it?
Limited spoilers.
Yeah, limited spoilers. So just the gist of it is like I said, you're sneaking into the Empire. You're dressed as stormtroopers, which helps because everything weighs so much that it adds to the immersion because you feel like you're in a suit anyway. And it's kind of like a wave shooter at some points where it's just like there's a bunch of stormtroopers and you're shooting them, walking from room to room, which is cool. Like I feel like that was the coolest part because you can walk to the rooms. I kept touching all the walls and they're all real. Some of them aren't real, which I almost fell a few times because I think they're, I don't know, a little bit not completely accurate. But it's overall just
so
like
were the in-game virtual walls roughly mapped to the physical walls? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Which is really cool. The leap motion is pretty limited. Like I wish they had a better hand tracking solution. Like if there was gloves or something, it would be a lot better because the hands kept glitching out. Like just like they do when any of you have tried the leap motion before. Like it's not very good, but it's decent. I feel like the biggest problem for me was just the limited field of view because you're in all these really tiny rooms with 3 other people. It's like you go in pods of 4. And like you can't see anybody until you like turn around, so like you keep running into everybody. I don't know. If it was just me, it'd probably be more fun, more immersive. But I was in there with 2 people who had never done VR, period. So that was funny. He's like, "Where's my feet?" I'm like, "Oh, you don't see those. Don't worry."
PD asked. He said, "Chris, if this was the first time you have ever tried if you had ever tried VR, would it make you want VR at home?"
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. Like these people were like at the end like maybe I should have tried this at Best Buy first. There's a lot of crazy stuff that happens. Like you feel heat and you feel wind. There's lava at some points. The tracking was like 98% perfect. It seemed a little delayed sometimes, which kind of sucks. I wish they fixed that. Probably the worst thing. I mean, it was great. Don't get me wrong. The worst thing was just that it's all these tiny rooms. And you could tell that they had to squeeze a lot of this experience in this one place because they do 20 people per hour kind of thing, or 20 people every 15 minutes, I mean. And you're in groups of 4. So there's just a lot of little blocks and this building wasn't too big. So I wish I was in a giant warehouse where they could really go wild with this stuff.
Chris Cox just asked about how did it look visually? Were the graphics impressive?
Oh yeah, it was really impressive. It felt like it was, like 1080 graphics kind of thing, and it was just like a backpack PC. Really impressive graphics. Like it had a few times where it froze and like the vision got stuck, but other than that, it was really impressive. Like I don't know if you remember that like LMK Labs, like they had like a Star Wars experience, but it could barely run on our computers. Like I could barely run that thing, but I heard like it looked really good if you had the right hardware for it. It was very similar to that, as by those same people.
Well, yeah, as the trailer showed, it's ILM X Lab.
ILM.
It was it International Light and Magic or something like that. They
something like that.
Yeah, they make things that look good. We know that. They know that they can do very high quality visuals.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, that was.
Was there a gun, or was it purely you were just interacting with your hands via leap motion? Was there a controller of any kind at any point?
Yeah, so like maybe 25% of the way through, we went in this room where there were 4 guns, and they were tracked like very accurately. So they must use some other system for that. But it was cool because I was like, "Dad, pass me my gun," and he just handed me my gun, and it's exactly real. There's a trigger, and that was amazing.
Did you notice, because the OptiTrack method of tracking that they use, where you've got these ball things that stick out on sticks, and I've heard that maybe it's not necessarily all the voids or even most of them, but I've heard that some use that. Did you notice that on the guns, or did they not have anything visible at all?
You couldn't. I should have popped it up to check, but I'm pretty sure they did use something similar.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you
the OptiTrack. Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure it was something like that.
Did the guns have any kick or rumble or kickback to it?
Yeah, they all like buzzed. So they had some haptics. They weren't the best haptics, but it was pretty impressive. I think the coolest thing for me was like touching all the walls, and like if there's a droid there, I could touch it. I feel like most people don't care about this stuff, or like wouldn't do that stuff, but for me it was really cool. There's one point where you're pressing buttons and like it's kind of like a remember game, like the buttons beep in a certain way, and I was the one who was pressing them a certain way while all the other three were like shooting a bunch of droids. Um, so that's pretty cool. It was off by maybe an inch. I was like, come on, just move it over a little bit. But it's so close to like it's really impressive. I feel like it's worth the price for VR enthusiasts just to try it. I was really surprised. Most of the people, what were you gonna say?
I'll say, well, while you're on the subject of price, how much was it and how long was the experience?
Yeah, so it's $33. The experience in VR itself is probably like 15 minutes, which goes by really fast. But they have that pre-show, which is probably another 10-ish minutes. It's I don't know. It's if you look at it, it's a little steep.
I assume that was 33 per person, not 33 for you and your pops, huh?
Yeah, 33 per person. It is a little steep. But you know, I feel like it's just like we get the chance to try this stuff and try what it would be like. It's cool for like a one-time thing for sure.
Yeah.
I have one. Oh,
Go ahead, Anthony.
Well, I was just going to say, like, I've always wondered how much extra immersion you do get. Like, if, okay, you see a wall and you're touching the wall, like, could you put some kind of number on that? Like, how it, like, is it really a big deal, or is it just kind of like a slight little bonus, or does it really, or maybe because it wasn't perfectly tracked, you know, like the buttons you said were maybe like an inch off. I'm just curious, like, how much immersion does that add? Is it a game changer, or is it just a mild improvement in immersion?
It's surprising because I thought it'd be like a more of a game changer, but I think just the being able to walk around freely is the biggest game changer, because you're not reaching out and touching walls in real life. So you just kind of assume the wall's there. But I mean, there were times when I was in the spaceship and I was like leaning on the wall, and one time my thumb got jammed because there's like a door that I didn't see because it's in the real world, not in the VR world. It's closed on my thumb. I'm like, geez. So like sometimes, you know, things weren't perfect like that. But
when you're looking at when you're looking at the other three people that were in the experience, do you just see like their head and their hands, or what do you see?
You see a full body. I think the inverse kinematics, the legs, or like they make the legs kind of look like they're walking. That was probably the most impressive thing, because I knew my dad was actually there, so I'd like pat him on the back sometimes. He's scared of heights, and like it was just so much heights and so much.
Oh,
it was
that's
very
cool.
Intense. I did one of those or a few of those elevator things where like it feels like you're going up or down, while the floor is like vibrating, and then just in VR you're falling. That was probably one of the coolest effects. So anything like to do with walking and the feet and like feeling the heat and everything, I think that was probably the most immersive part for me. Yeah.
Yeah. So does anybody know all the locations of the Void? Because they used to have one in London, and I think they're coming back from what on their website. I went onto it because I was planning on going down there and trying the Void at some point, but they're not there at the moment, but hopefully they will come back. How many locations are there around the world? Does anybody know at all?
It looks like there's 5.
I know they're in
maybe?
Utah, LA, Orlando, right? I mean, I think their parent company is from Utah.
Right.
There's one in New York, wasn't there, for a while, with the Ghostbusters?
Madame Tussauds Wax Museum area. It's right by there, right?
That one was like 70 per person, so I feel like I got a good deal compared to that, because I was originally going to try that one out, but you know, I don't care about the Wax Museum too much, and you have to kind of go in that too. Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess we can get on to a few games that we've been playing now. Chris, do you want to hang around for a while, or have you got to shoot off?
I gotta head out. I guess there's one more thing I forgot to mention, which is annoyed me to no end, which is that the HMD weighed like maybe 5 times what the Rift weighs, because they added all this plastic that kind of looked retro or something, but it was all so heavy, and I'm like, if you just had a Rift with Elite Motion, it'd be light and easy, but like, man, that really sucked for me. So that was probably the worst thing, as knowing what VR is like and how comfortable stuff can be. Like that was all wrong, you know.
Did you get hot like moving around and stuff like that as well? Yeah.
It was really sweaty in there because instead of there being rooms where it was cold, there was always like lava, and just made you hotter instead of. They should have had like a cold place or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But overall, I'd recommend it if any of you guys can try it out, and if you live near Orlando or anything, at least try it once.
So I'm going to
it's not
be
perfect,
I'm going to be in Orlando in late September, early October. Finally taking the kids to that place that I can't say in case they hear it. So I may give it a go while I'm down there. We'll see.
I should mention one other thing that's kind of similar to VR, but not really. I went to the Pandora Land in Animal Kingdom, and that was maybe one of the most immersive experiences I've ever had in my life, because it's like it's kind of like Soarin', if anyone's ever been on Soarin', where you're flying over stuff. But I think the projector was like 8K or something. It was almost retinal quality, and like you had 3D glasses that were actually really good. So like I was tearing up. I'm like, man, this is insane. Like if VR ever got to this point, like it would just blow my mind. So that's a must ride, I think. If you come here, Steve, you'd love it.
Cool. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for those impressions. Because, like I say, I did mean to go and try the Void when it was on in London, and I'm really, really tempted when it comes back, because it is coming back. I really want to sort of make some time and do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess we can get on to some games. So we'll say goodbye to Chris, and we'll see you next week.
See you, Chris.
See you guys next week.
Take it
I'll
easy,
be in
Chris.
college. That'd be crazy. All right. Bye, everyone.
Later.
Okay, so we've got a few games that we want to discuss this week. We can go over, well, because we've been off for a few weeks, we've got a little bit of a backlog, but we can go over these now. So Electronauts, this is one I haven't actually played. It's a rhythm game, and anybody that's been a fan of the show for a while will know that I'm not really a big fan of rhythm games. So I haven't give this one a try, but I know it's got some pretty positive impressions from what I've read. Steve, what did you think of this?
Yeah, well, it's funny you said that, because yeah, it's not a rhythm game at all, actually, because you don't need to have any rhythm whatsoever. It's not a game, actually. What it is they give you they have a collection of songs, okay? And so you choose a song, and then basically you are the DJ, you're the producer, and you can now take this track and you can do all kinds of crazy things with it. You can come up with your own little remix. So you can just basically, the coolest thing about Electronauts, like I really wasn't looking forward to this very much. I'll be completely honest with you. Servios sent me a key for this game, and I was like, oh, I love Servios. You know, I liked Raw Data. I liked Sprint Vector. You know, I know they got Creed coming up. I'm a fan of this developer, right? They're pretty cool. They're doing great things in VR. So I'm going to go ahead and try this. And, you know, I feel like I need to try this. And I was really impressed by everything that happened, because basically you take a song and you can take like the background beat, and then you have these little effect balls that are up there, and you have like these little drumsticks, and you can just start doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And one of the best explanations of this that I saw was Upload VR. Like their title was basically Electronauts can make you feel like a badass DJ in 5 minutes flat, which is pretty much what it is. That's basically like, you will feel like, oh my God, I'm like Kanye West and Dr. Dre combined. You know, I'm like doing all these with these balls, you know, making all these special effects. And in the beginning, I was actually more hyped on Electronauts than I probably should have been, because I actually thought you could make your own beat like from scratch. But no, you're using their songs, you're remixing the songs. You can kind of like resequence it and do all these kinds of things. I think it is super cool. And you know what it is awesome for, actually? If you were going to have a party and you had some big tower speakers set up, you could play Electronauts, and you could basically be like it could just be a party, you know, and you're just playing this music, and you could just have people cycle in, put the headset on, and do a bunch of crazy shit, and it'll sound good, because the way Servios designed this is there's basically like a no fail mode. Like you can't make it sound horrible, which kind of sucks in a certain way because it means you're not really that good, you know?
Well, one thing that you've just hit just there, Anthony, on a point that maybe that's why sometimes I'm not really into these rhythm games, and it's because if you make a mistake, it's not making a difference. It's making a difference to your score and how far you might progress through the game, but it's not really making a difference in many circumstances in terms of how the song sounds or anything like that. And I'd love it where there were consequences in terms of if you miss a beat or you're not doing something correctly, then the sound cuts out. And I know there have been games that have done that where it doesn't quite do it in that way. And I think that makes a difference. And like Guitar Hero, I think that might have done that. Where there's sort of glitches and things like that where you don't hit the beats bang on. But like for a lot of rhythm games that I've played, Beat Saber's just coming to mind, but I don't know if this one necessarily suffers from that or not. But the fact is, when you miss something, you don't get like an audio penalty. It's more like a score and this kind of stuff. But
you can't do wrong in this game. There is no missing. It's not a game. It's a music creation. What it is it's a demo. Like it's a VR experience that uses music is what it is. Like if you ever tried the Chainsmokers video, like one of the coolest things about Electronauts in general is I like music videos in VR. We've seen Surge VR, right? That is a cool experience. It's like this music video that's going all around you. You're hearing the music and it looks really cool. We've seen Chainsmokers in Paris on PlayStation VR, which is another music video in VR where it does some little interactive stuff. This is kind of similar to all of that, except at the same time, you got two drumsticks in your hand and you're doing these things with all these little effects. You're grabbing these little sound grenades, you throw them, it makes a little noise. You're switching things up. You really, truly feel like a badass. And there literally will be a day in VR where lots of things are going to be created in VR, not because of the novelty of VR, but because it's the easiest way to create things. And Survios, they can take the skeleton of this game and actually make a complete music creation suite from this and charge like $99 for it. And they'll sell a lot of them because people that want to rap or sing or whatever, but they don't know how to make beats, you can kind of make a damn good beat pretty fast with this. I put my wife in this. She doesn't do anything in VR, and she stayed in there for 25 minutes screwing around with all kinds of things, and she didn't know what the hell she was doing, but she had a lot of fun. I'm telling you, if you're going to have a party and you have some big loudspeakers and, take the headphones off of your Rift or whatever and just have somebody DJing, this would be a fun thing to do.
Cool.
Yep.
Steve, are you back with us?
Hopefully everyone in chat can hear me now. Dang OBS. Anyways, so like I maybe missed part of what you guys said, unfortunately, but so hopefully I'm not too repetitive. But I think this is a very good tool for playing around with music. You don't have to be a fan of rhythm games or anything like that. This is a tool. It's like a sort of a one of those books that's like the Idiot's Guide to Baking Cookies or whatever. This is like the Idiot's Guide to making tech music. It's very simple to use. There's a tutorial in the beginning, and it all works real well. And I think behind the scenes is, like when you have your sticks and you hit the little orbs that has all those little sounds, like they have set it up where you can like when you hit it, if you're not perfectly on rhythm, there's a little lag to the effect, so that it keeps all of your little hits on rhythm. So you don't have to be like a perfect, you don't have to be a drummer, or you don't have to be like really musically experienced in order to make something that sounds good. So they did a lot of things behind the scenes that really make this a good tool set. And my idiot's guide is how I'll call this game. This is a VR idiot's guide to making tech or dance or dubstep. I don't know all the what makes all that kind of stuff different because I don't really listen to this kind of music, but when I played it, I was in there for like an hour. Like I was just like, oh, I'm going to play it so I can be able to talk about it on the show. Like, you know, I don't know if it's really a thing for me and all that. And when I was in there, I was just like, it kept going and kept going and kept going. And, you know, my son came in and he tugged on me. He's like, you've been in there for an hour. You said I get a turn. You know, so I think the time can go by really fast. So if you're a fan of music, particularly this style of music, and you know, you're one of those people that fools around with being a DJ or making tracks, I think you'd have a lot of fun with this.
Survios absolutely needs to make a demo for this that just has one track. Maybe you can only do it for 2 minutes or something. They will sell a ton of copies if they just had a demo, because it's just fun. The second time I did it, it was the day before Electronauts came out. And I was like, well, I need to go back into Electronauts because on my show, it's going to come out tomorrow and I'll officially talk about it. So let me just go in there for 20 minutes. And just like Steve, I was like, I'm going to go in there for 20 minutes just so I can kind of refresh. I was in there for an hour and a half and had no idea that I would be in there for an hour and a half, but I was just having fun. It's just FUN, fun, period.
Well, one thing that makes me, when you're talking about this, so it's not really a game, it's more of an experience. But one thing for me is like, I like drawing and painting, and tilt brush should be something that I'm really drawn to, and I love it. I think it's great, but part of it for me is the fact that I'm not able to do anything with it. Why am I creating all of this art? What am I doing with it? And do you get any hint of that with this game? You know, it's a different kind of circumstance, but do you get any hint of why am I doing this really? It's great, and maybe I'm having fun for a limited amount of time, but to what end am I doing this? Does that come up at all?
I think you could feel that way. Like, as far as I could see, there really wasn't a lot that you could do with what you created. So if you really wanted to have a purpose or a way to show off your creation, I think that's very much the same as what you described with Tilt Brush. Now you could, like, if you have a YouTube channel or something, you could stream this and share it with people. But then, because these are actual licensed tracks from actual like artists, I don't know that it wouldn't get caught in the content ID or whatever, you know, the IP protections that are kind of built into streaming services like YouTube and I assume Twitch, Facebook, and all the others. So you may even have an issue streaming it. I don't know how they get around it, but of course you could always just kind of record it and share it and you know, show people personally, you know, without making it public to the internet.
Just make sure it's not the Chainsmokers, because I played an Electronauts trailer that had the Chainsmokers in it, and it was like my YouTube video was like off limits for like 24 hours. I had to edit out that audio. Like I had to use some YouTube audio editing thing because of the Chainsmokers. So yeah, one of the things I was telling Servios in the beginning is I thought this would be super cool. Like, I have teenage boys, and sometimes they try to screw around and make their own beat and like try to rap to it or whatever, right? This would have been super cool if they could actually literally make their own beat and export it as an MP3 to their computer and actually have the rights to that beat, and then they could throw it on SoundCloud with a rap behind it or whatever, and it's their own little thing. And I really think Servios maybe should explore this, but it would be like a $99 thing. They'd have to get way more in depth on like making the beats and the effects and all of that. But I think there could be a future there. And I know there's other music creation stuff in VR that I just don't really know about.
It sounds like they did set it up somewhat for sharing, and I'd have to explore it further. But Anthony, did you notice the selfie cam? It was like a GoPro thing on a stick
that you hold around.
Yeah, so I played around with that, and the footage that you guys are seeing here on the stream, outside of the actual Electronauts trailer itself, is footage from me and my son playing. And when you did that, the social screen was able to pick up on your selfie stick, you know, the camera where you point. So you can kind of go back and forth, like if you want to share it between the selfie stick camera view and then the first person view from the person wearing the VR mask. So it seems like sharing to some extent is something they thought about, but
there's
I don't know how you get around it.
I think there's multiplayer, like two people can be in it at once, like doing all kinds of crazy shit together. Hey, Steve, when you were playing it, did you notice? Okay, so sometimes in the backgrounds, they just have that like tunnel, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a basic background with like all this, it's like a music visualizer tunnel.
Yep.
But then some of the songs would actually have like a 3D landscape that looked cool, like a music video. Did you notice that, Steve? Because I thought, like, I really enjoyed it when it was those songs that had like a music video background.
So I made the mistake of I've only played 2 songs. Like when I was in there, I was working so deep with one song and turning the vocals off and on and creating the segments and all that I stayed for a long time on just a couple of songs. So I probably need to check out more of the songs. I only ever saw the tunnel background.
Oh yeah, there's some other, like, the Surge music video and Chainsmokers and all that. That's what I really liked, is because I thought, man, if every one of these songs had a really interesting like Tron looking background going on while you're doing the song as well, it'd make it even better. But the few songs that did have that, it was pretty sweet.
Cool. Sounds pretty good.
So maybe I'll give it a go.
We'll see. Okay, let's get on to the we've got quite a few games that we want to talk about. We might not get through them all, but why don't we get on to, well, let's go for Megaton Rainfall first of all. So this is a game that's been out on PSVR for a while. It's by Pentadimensional Games. It's for $14.99 or £10.99. That is now come out on the Oculus Rift. So is it on Steam VR as well? Is it on Steam?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So it's available on Steam and on the Oculus Store. So this is a game that we've already played in the past, but we just want to give our impressions on sort of the translation over to the Oculus Rift. So I played this for a while, and honestly, it's pretty much the same game. The only difference is the motion controllers for me. So I played it on the Oculus Rift, and you can now control your height variation on this game by moving the controllers up or down. And I played it originally on the PSVR on a gamepad, and I love that, just seated and just playing it in that way. I thought it was a pretty good game. It's not really got a lot of depth to it. You're doing these levels which are relatively simple. You're battling these alien enemies and just flying around from city to city. Which is good enough. I really enjoyed my experience in there, and it's not a particularly expensive game anyway. So I think it was great. Playing with the motion controllers is good. Well, let me pass it over. What did you guys think of the motion controllers? Because I think, Anthony, go ahead. You've got some strong opinions.
I looked forward to this idea of using the motion controllers because it sounds like it would be super sweet to use the motion controllers, because you're basically, this game is War of the Worlds meets Google Earth meets Superman. It's War of the Worlds, Google Earth, and Superman. And so you're Superman in part of this game. And so like you can have your motion controllers and you go up like this, and then you're going up to space. You go down like this, you're going down towards the planet. And then there's these alien vehicles, and so you could shoot your laser beams like right at the alien vehicles. However, I had a lot of problems with the motion controls because first of all, the hands don't line up with where my hands lined up. Also, I noticed you go like this for about 10 minutes. You're doing this for about 10 minutes. Your arms start, why am I doing this? And when I was aiming, like trying to shoot my like Iron Man shots at these different alien vehicles, none of it felt good to me. And so the next time I played Megaton Rainfall on, it was the Oculus version that I played, I was like, okay, I'm just going to go back to an Xbox controller. Had way more fun with the regular Xbox controller because all the motion controls in theory sounds great, but I think it was just kind of tacked on. But the thing that I do love about Megaton Rainfall, and this goes back to when I did it on PSVR, is the alien vehicles. The alien vehicles are awesome. It's like this alien civilization just kicked back, looked at planet Earth and said, okay, let's spend 100 years figuring out how we're going to design these vehicles that are just going to rip their cities to shreds. And that's what they did. And it's like the sound of those vehicles, and then it's all your little citizens running around on the ground, or like you see this alien vehicle, you're trying to shoot it, it moves, and then bam, your laser blast just destroys a freaking skyscraper, and you're hearing all these people yell and scream bloody murder. when I first played this on PSVR, I was really blown away by it. Playing it now, I've already experienced it, so I'm not like blown away by it. Again, this is not a game. It's not going to hold you over for like months and months, like a Talos Principle or a Fallout 4 or something. It's a game. It's a palate cleanser. You're going to screw around with it a little bit for the price, $15-$16 or whatever. I think it's a great game, especially if you like War of the Worlds, Superman, Google Earth.
Yeah,
But,
one thing I wanted to mention before I pass it over to Steve is, and this is something we discussed when Steve came over to my house. We were talking about Megaton Rainfall, and one of the main problems that people had with it on its initial release on PSVR is the fact that a lot of it didn't feel 3D. And it doesn't. There is definitely some kind of problem, and I know that things you get less 3D effects the further away things are, and you're moving around these cities. So all the buildings are quite a long way off. But to me, I never felt immersed in this game, and as you say, Anthony, it's not a bad game. It's actually a pretty good game just to enjoy it on that level. But the 3D and the immersion just is where this game fell down for me. Steve, what did you think?
The 3D effects are really subdued, right? Like there could be a little more stereoscopy. I don't know if that's a correct word, but there could be more of that in this game for sure, no question. Other than that, I really like this game, so it's hard for me to say something as you say fell down. Cause I think this is a really, really good game at a really, really good price. The big point here is once again I agree with Anthony that the motion controls, like, something wasn't right, and I don't know if it's because I played so much time with this game with a gamepad that it was hard to sort of retrain my brain with motion controls. Like, would I feel the same way about the motion controls if it was the first time I ever played Megaton Rainfall? And I don't know, and there's no way to go back in time and correct that. So I really didn't actually like them. The holding your hand up like Superman about to lift off the ground, and more importantly, like when you just shoot your very basic blast, like it seemed to want to like give it a little sort of throw, almost like a little baseball to get it going. It just, all of it resulted in me being less capable of dealing with these aliens. Like, you need, the way they move, they're so jerky. It's almost like the developer is able to anticipate you pressing your shoot button, and then right, the microsecond before you press it, it has the alien move, and it makes you miss them. So I was just gonna say, this guy needs to make a movie, man. The way he did these aliens. Yeah, like, and so the way you have to deal with these aliens, like, you really have to be on point, and you have to be really accurate, and you have to get your timing, and all that stuff. So anything that gets in the way of that efficiency, it's a lot like Skyrim VR on PlayStation VR for me. Like, I found that using the Move controllers just sort of got in my way of doing the job that I was trying to do, and that was, kill orcs and crap. So I like the gamepad, but other than that, like, either way, if you like playing this game with motion controls and you prefer it that way, or if you like using a gamepad, I think this is a game definitely worth picking up. I don't know off the top of my hand the price, but it was like $16 on PlayStation VR. I assume it's in the same neighborhood on Steam and Oculus, and if so, I think it's a good deal.
Yeah, I saw that it was $15 on Oculus and $16 on Steam for some weird reason.
Yeah,
it's a
I
$1
saw
difference.
That too. Yeah.
The one little negative I will say real quick about Megaton Rainfall is I was disappointed that the developer, okay, so like the little menus, like the little arrow cursors, and like your like there's some little indicators that come on the screen, and to me it's amateur hour. A lot of these little indicators and menus, it's like it. When I was talking about Pixel Ripped 1989, I was like, man, there's so much polish, like all these little things that they do, the sound effects, and there's a lot of polish. Megaton Rainfall, I just felt like some of the indicators and stuff like lack polish. It looks very amateur to me, and it was the same way on PSVR, and I thought, well, 10 months later or a year later or whatever this is coming out, I thought maybe it'd improve that, and I didn't see that. But
Yeah, to me, it feels like pretty much the same game that I played on PSVR with the added motion controllers. That's sort of my takeaway from it. And as you have both said, I think it is a good game. It's not it's not bad by any means, and I think that it's a very fair price for what this game offers. Okay, well, let's go back and talk about the persistence now. Again, this is one that I've not played, and part of the reason for this is because I've no longer got a PSVR, and this is sort of by accident. I found this deal for a version 2 of a PSVR on Tesco Direct. Anyone in the UK will know that name, and they had a closing down sale, and it was $179 for a V2 PSVR. So I jumped on, and I thought I'll get that, and then I'll put mine on eBay. So I sold mine on eBay, and then 2 weeks later, I got an email through saying that they couldn't fulfill the orders because they didn't have any stock from Tesco's. So yeah, I'm screwed really. I've not got a PSVR now, so I've sort of got to pay quite a hefty penalty for trying to upgrade my system to a V2, or just wait for a sale. So I've not decided what I'll do yet, but that's the reason I've not played any PSVR titles recently. But anyway, The Persistence is a title by Fire Sprite, and it's for $29.99. Steve, I'll go over to you first.
So, The Persistence, I wish the game would have came out at a different time, because I just had so much to play. And this is a game you can throw some meaty hours at. What the game is, and I don't know all of the story and all of the backdrop because I haven't completed it. But the sort of the setting is, if you think Dead Space, like, it really reminds me a lot of Dead Space in terms of the setting. You're on this spaceship, and you've got to do something, and something has happened. I'm trying not to spoil what I do know, and there are zombie-esque type baddies all around, and you have to deal with them. There's a lot of sci-fi to it, kind of mixed with horror. Like, and most of the parts of the ship, the lights don't work, so everything's real dark and scary. And the bad guys, they can kind of come at you with speed. Like, they have really good detection software here, where if you creep behind them, but if you make one mistake, they'll detect you, and almost like what's the zombie movie, Walking Z-Day, something like some zombies, they walk real slow, and others can kind of move and scurry real fast, depending on the universe, I guess, the content that you're watching. And in this one, they can move pretty quick. They're not the slow moving variety. So all in all, the setting is pretty incredible. One of the other aspects of the game is that it's procedurally drawn. So, like, each time you come in and you play a game, or you die, or you go to an area, when you come back, it may be different. So everyone's playthrough will vary. It's not drastically different in terms of how you play the games. Just things are just positioned slightly here or there, and it can make for what I think is less of a linear. I prefer something that's straightforward and scripted, particularly in VR, where they can leverage the medium. They can leverage everything that makes VR good. So I prefer something a little more scripted and a little more put together. But this game is still really, really good. And again, I have to give it more time. To borrow a phrase from Anthony, I've just scratched the surface. So it's a good game. I think you put it now, Gary, it's $30. From the amount of hours that I can see that you'll get out of it, and what people are reporting on Reddit, getting 20, 30 hours out of it, I think it's definitely worth the value there. It is gamepad. I'm pretty sure you can't play it with the motion controllers, and it's a lot of face aiming when you do play with a gamepad, but I think it's really well done. This is one of the more put together games to come out exclusively for PlayStation in a while.
It's one of the ones that was on the demo disc. I think it might have been on demo disc 2, possibly, but it's one that I did play through the demo, and it just didn't grab me for whatever reason. So this has never really been on my list of anticipated games or anything like that, and yet at the same time, since it's come out, it seems to have a very positive response. So when I get my PSVR back, I will, I'm going to give this one a try. Anthony, did you try The Persistence?
Yeah, I played it back when it first came out, and unfortunately, we got bombarded with all the, Pixel Ripped, Hellblade, all those things came. Marvel Powers United VR, all these games came out like several days after this game launched, and so I haven't returned back to it. But I was enjoying my time with it. Um, it's incredibly visceral, and I know visceral is the most played out word of all time, but this is a visceral game, very much like Killing Floor Incursion. I always said in Killing Floor Incursion, these zombies, they come stomping at you. They get up all up in your face. You turn around, bam, there's a zombie right up in your face. And this game, the persistence is very similar to that. Like if you're squeamish, if you don't like horror, you probably want to stay away from this game. But the thing I will say though is like Sony has been incredibly blessed from the standpoint that they don't necessarily have like 5 new PSVR games coming out every single month. They have a game that comes out here, a game that comes out there. You know what I mean? They got Wipeout VR. It was perfect timing. Then like a couple months later, Moss came out, perfect timing. Then they got To the Top, a really great port. That worked out great. Then we got the persistence. Sony has been incredibly fortunate that they've had these third-party developers deliver some really key games at some really key times that have really helped them out. This is a $30 game. It's $29.99. If this was on PC, it might seem a little bit expensive. On PSVR, there's kind of that console tax, because they got to pay like an extra $10 to Sony for every game they sell or whatever. So there is that. But I think for the price and how much you play this game, I think it's a solid game. But what Steve was talking about, one of the things that does bother me, it is a roguelike, so you're supposed to die and kind of start all the way over. But one of the problems I have with all of these VR games is like when you put on a headset and you're playing a game, it's like checkpointing. Like I want to know that if I'm playing a game for an hour and a half, I want the game to save so that the next time I get back in, I can kind of take over from that spot. And so starting over all the time, if I'm playing a flat game and I'm just sitting on a couch, it might not be a big deal. But every time you're throwing, it's like, Gary, you talk about gearing up, getting ready to play VR, and setting it up and putting the headset on and putting your headphones on. And a little bit of that roguelike scenario where it's like, oh man, I lost all my progress. Now, where am I now? I got to start over kind of,
Yeah, I want to say, because on that point, because sometimes we'll get comments where I do speak about this thing of the friction of getting into VR experiences. Just to touch on what you were mentioning there, Anthony. It's not like my setup is that bad in terms of like all I have to do is come into my office, turn on my PC, put on my headset, and I'm in there. But even that, and I know it just sounds like laziness or whatever. It's just the fact that anything we can do to reduce this, and that's part of the reason why I love the Oculus Go. It's reducing the amount of friction. You don't need to think about it. You can be sitting anywhere in your house and put on this headset, and you're there. You're within VR. So we get a lot of comments saying maybe you need to look at your setup and get it so it's less hassle. And I think I've got my setup pretty good, but it's still that level. You know what I mean? It's still that thing that you need to do, and it's something that a lot of people that are gamers and like some of these YouTubers that I watch, they'll say, we are gamers, but we don't want to get into VR because we don't want to sit there with something on our face. We just want to come home from work, relax in front of the TV and play a game. I don't completely understand that, because I want more of an immersive experience, and that's why I make the effort to do this. But it's just an interesting topic to think that when we get to the point of, say, Santa Cruz, where we're getting better experiences than the Oculus Go, but we don't need to turn on a PC, we don't need to be in a dedicated room or anything like that.
Yeah, it's first world problems, but like when I want to play a VR game, it's like, okay, let me turn on my Oculus. Okay, Oculus is working. I'm hearing Oculus sound. Okay, now let me go over to my PC. Let me start up the Steam VR game. Okay, did it load up right? Did I have to hit that button where it says start an you're going through, it's first world problems, but again, the old days, you plugged a game in, you turned it on, and you immediately played, and it is a bit of an issue.
Yeah.
Going back to the persistence a little bit, Fluke says, I don't want to comment on the persistence now, as it will just sound like I'm being a downer on everything. However, after Alien Isolation, the persistence is nothing special at all. And, I think that's a very good point. Now, a lot of people on the PlayStation VR community that don't have PC VR, they don't get to experience Alien Isolation. But I won't be as much of a downer as him, because the persistence is trying to do things a little bit differently. But if I had to choose between those two games, Alien Isolation with the third-party mod done by Mother or Nibre, I would definitely choose that game over the persistence. So I don't think it's necessarily an apples to apples comparison, but in terms of setting and feel, there is quite a bit of overlap there. But yes, I would also give the nod to Alien Isolation. Moving on to what you guys were talking about, friction and all that. Like last night, I completed Hellblade. And fantastic game. I absolutely loved it, which no surprise, all the haters are going to say I love a sit-down gamepad game. But I think that is something to the point you guys are making. Like there are times where you're just tired, like, and it's not so much hey, I just went out and ran a marathon tired. It's just like for whatever reasons you don't want to suit up, and I think the sit down gamepad games can kind of maybe fall somewhere in the middle, where you can still do some VR. Maybe you don't feel like standing up and playing something a little more interactive. So when I got done with Hellblade, I was at that conundrum where I was like, okay, my family was all gone off doing something else, and I had another hour to burn. It had gotten later in the night by the time I got done with Hellblade, and I was like, okay, well, I can play something else right now, but I don't really want to. Like, and that was a problem. I never really felt that way with prior to the VR days, where I could just lounge back in my theater and play the latest Uncharted or whatever was the current sauce. Like, I don't know what that is, and it's got to be that friction, those additional steps of just getting involved into something, getting the wrist straps on your controller. It's just every little step. They, like you say, Gary, it makes you sound lazy, but it's just a convenience. That's why in our lives, most cars now come with power windows, because it's just laziness. You don't want to sit and crank to roll a window down like we all had to growing up, but all those little quality of life things add up to just make an experience better. And I hope we get to a point where friction is greatly reduced. Yeah.
Okay. Have we got time for one more game that we can talk about? How are we doing? Yep. Okay. Let's go for. Well, shall we talk about Summer Funland? Because
we can do Summer Funland.
This one. Okay, so this is a game by Monad Rock. It's for $20. I guess that translates to £15. I didn't actually have a look at that, unfortunately. But so this is sort of kind of like a carnival game kind of thing. At least that's what I expected when I went into it. And it is pretty much that. It's not radically different from a carnival games kind of thing. So you go into this theme park and you've got various things that you can go to and sort of experience. Now, on the surface, when I first went into this, I was thinking, do I really even want to talk about this or even play it? Because you're throwing things. You're using your motion controllers to throw things at like a stall or something like that. So you're throwing balls at a stall to knock down something. And I've already done that. I've already done that in carnival games. But the part for me that actually blew me away was the fact that the experiences it offers. Now, this is more to I guess it's sort of demo material. It's like the underwater experience. I don't know how much of this you guys have played, but the underwater experience was one of the first things that blew me away. So you can go into this thing, and it's not a game. You're just traveling around this theme park, and then you can play some of these little mini games, but then you've got this underwater section that you can go in. And it's like an experience that you will go to at various theme parks. But the fact that you're in VR, they can do some pretty special stuff in there. And I think this is equal, or if not better than, some of the sections in the Blue, for example, in terms of demoing. You can put somebody in the underwater part, or even the space part, which, it didn't go on quite long enough for me. I wish they did more with that. But the underwater part was something you could put anybody in, because it's a very passive experience, and yet you're traveling through this underwater environment, which is actually very, very well rendered. There's some incredible graphics going on here, and there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of spectacle to view while you're going through this. I was actually very, very impressed with those aspects of this game more than just the carnival games kind of parts of it, which are sort of, we've seen it before. I think we've seen that kind of stuff before in VR. Anthony, what did you think of this?
Yeah, well, speaking to the underwater thing, because I only tried this one time, and I tried a couple of different little games that they had, and then I tried the underwater thing. I was blown away. Like that underwater thing, I think they could sell that for like $7-8 just by itself. Like I think it's that good. And now you say you could put anybody in it, but there were a couple of brief seconds where I got a little bit oozy with some of the things that are going on. But one of the things that I thought about with that underwater thing, and this is kind of like a side tangent, but I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we had a VR floor? Like, what if somebody made a VR floor that was like 4 feet by 4 feet, 3 feet by 3 feet? It's like 4 inches tall. You stand on it. It's synced up to the game. You feel a little bit of rumble, because there were certain parts you're like in this submarine and you're seeing all this stuff. And I could imagine like they could, speaking of like the void and stuff, if they had this exact experience, but you were inside something that kind of shaked and moved, or you felt like, maybe it hits a blast of like air pressure or something, some extra sounds that are going on. I was really impressed with the underwater thing. Really like that.
Yeah, I loved it. Steve.
I'm in the boat with you guys. Like some of the experience I tried, I think I tried them all at some point. It reminds me a lot of the game, for obvious reasons, the Carnival games that came out very early in the VR days, right around the launch of the PlayStation VR time. This reminds me a lot of that, but it's also different. Like it focuses more on the rides. There's a climbing wall one and all that, but like you guys and everyone that has followed us for a while knows, I'm a huge sucker for anything underwater. And the underwater ride definitely steals the show for me. Just the scale, they were smart enough. It is a piece of content that they give you the vessel that you're in, so it anchors you. So for a lot of people that may experience motion sickness, they have that anchor, and that really helps when things are moving. And a lot of games that actually do an anchor really help. That same thing with the roller coaster that it's showing now. When you have that anchor, it's purely a mental thing. It somehow helps the motion sickness aspect. So also there's a complete knockoff of Batman. They call it Gotham Racer or something. I forget exactly what they call it, but you're basically on Batman's bike, and it's another ride. It's completely passive. Sit back and enjoy the ride kind of thing. But you kind of launch out of Batman's cave, but it's clearly 100% not licensed by Warner Brothers or DC or whoever holds the license nowadays. Like you can tell that they didn't get that actual license. But still, this game is worth checking out. Like everyone says, it's like $20. I think if you like carnival games and if you like experiences, I think someone in chat was talking about the Blue a couple of minutes ago. It's like it's in that vein. Like this isn't going to be something that you play as a game per se and get a ton of mileage out of. It's more of an experience. You may only go through it once or twice, so you'll have to decide if that is value for you. If you demo your VR gear a lot, if you're the hangout for the neighborhood kids and, you're always showing VR off to other people, this is one of the things that I think is easy to go to as demo material, because it's very basic and self-explanatory in that way. So you just have to assess the value there. So I'm saying all that just in terms of recommending, whether I think it's worth the $20 asking price. I enjoyed it, but I didn't pay for it. So I think a lot of people will enjoy this, so long as they don't think that $20 is too high of an asking price.
Yeah, I will say, like, on that price point, I'm not sure I would have paid that amount for it, but I do think that it offers great demo material. I mean, and not just that, there are some gaming elements in this, in various parts of it. Somebody mentioned the maze. So yeah, Paradise Decay said they recently added a new attraction, a maze, and that's not easy. That, you know, that takes some skill to get through that part. You're doing various things in there. So yeah, I think it's good title. Whether I'd pay that amount of money for it or not, probably not, but I think it's still worthwhile mentioning, keeping your eye on if it's ever in a sale. Okay, well, I guess we can leave it there this week. We can move on to some other games that we've been playing next week. But has anybody else got anything they want to add at all?
No, I just wanted to mention, once we're done with this show here, I was going to do a short little VR Game Rankings show on the VR Game Rankings channel, just daily vlog live. Probably pretty short episode, but calling it the after party. So if anybody in chat, 5 minutes later, just jump over there and I'll start that up when this is done.
Yep, and I'll just say the user Berber Cat in our chat was pointing out that Megaton Rainfall was made by one person. We may have forgot to mention that in this episode. I know we've talked about it in the past, but in terms of speaking about some of the polish and some of the fidelity, which I think is up there, you can tell, as Anthony mentioned, that that it maybe was a little amateur. But yes, this game is done by one person, and when you keep it in that perspective, that it was done by one person, it sort of does explain some of those little details. But I do want to, since it was brought up in chat, I did want to offer that clarity. We are very aware that Alfonso did this game by himself, and it's a very impressive feat for being done just by him. I do think he got the music, though. I don't think he made the music, but other than that, it's all done by him.
Yeah, good stuff. One final thing before we do go, very quickly, and this is something I meant to mention last week. Whitman Studios, they contacted us a few weeks ago. Now, this was when we were on our break, so I didn't have an opportunity to promote this, but they're releasing a VR title called People Cubed, and Lee from Whitman Studios, they did Whitway Studios, I believe. He did a ultra marathon, which is a ridiculous feat. So in order to promote the game, which I promised him a mention last week, just to sort of say something, but I didn't get around to it, unfortunately. So yeah, check out People Cubed on Steam. It's People Cubed, which is CU3ED. And it's just an upcoming title, but I just wanted to give a quick mention, because anybody that's prepared to do an ultra marathon to promote a title is a great thing. So yeah, he did a great job there. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say. So I guess that's it for this week, episode 93. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back at the same time next week, hopefully. But yeah, that's it from all of us on VR Roundtable. See you next week.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.